The greatest appeal comes from the significantly increased range of capabilities and the quality of work that can be done in space. And it can be done sustainably so, We just rely on solar power, and we use that solar power to create a magnetic field or magnetic sail, as you like. And we use that sail to interact with the magnetic wind of Earth, right? To simplify things, yeah. So just sailing in space.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain. Today we are talking with the folks from Zenno Astronautics. Erica Lloyd, great to have you here on the show. How are you?
Good to see you, Paul.
Thanks for taking the time to join us. And Max Ivashki, have I pronounced your name correctly?
Almost, Arshavsky.
There we go. That's how to say it. I'm going to have to practice that one. Apologies for messing that up. Great to have you both here, and a big thank you to our show partners, to 1NZ, the newly rebranded Vodafone, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, and Gorilla Technology. Now, today I want to delve into a little bit of local news. We are going to be delving into mostly sort of spacey type tech topics, and a little bit to do with the broader mobile world, and very, very keen to delve in and really hear about the Zenno story, which I think is an incredibly exciting one that really only probably a small percentage of New Zealanders know much about. So I think it's going to be great to share some of that story. First up, yesterday morning, I was with the team at 1NZ as they announced their partnership with SpaceX and Starlink. I was actually pretty excited last year when there was the announcement from SpaceX and T-Mobile that they were going to be adding cell sites to the Starlink satellites and providing that coverage right across the US. But for New Zealand to be one of the very first countries to also be signed up to that through 1NZ partnership, I thought is pretty pleasing, and reflects on just how quickly things are moving within the space sector, and I guess you would say for SpaceX with Starlink, they've rolled out an incredible number of satellites, haven't they, Max?
Yep, a lot of satellites. You can see them almost every night.
And thinking too what this means for everyday New Zealanders, right? Which I guess the recent cyclones and things brought up the stark relief of how essential it is to have access to 24/7, ubiquitous, high-quality broadband. So good on them for doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's going to be an interesting journey ahead because it's their second generation Starlink satellites. So these things are going to take some time to launch, aren't they? It's not something that happens overnight, right? So it's a lot of launches for them to be able to deliver what's needed to work for New Zealand.
It's good that we're starting to see direct impact of space exploration activities on regular citizens, regular people. Because I remember back in the day, NASA used to justify their budget by saying, "Look, the ball pen was invented by NASA, the Teflon pen, Teflon frying pans." But these days, it's much more applicable. All of us will feel the impact of exploring space. That's good.
And obviously just broadband access is sort of the first cab off the rank, right? There's so many more other benefits that will come from this partnership.
Yeah, and look, I think often that is the hard thing to understand is what does this new technology, what is the innovation, one innovation going to lead to, and often it's not always clear what those next things are, but over time they all become quite real to us as we start taking them for granted, right?
Well, I mean, I guess our appetite and requirement for real-time information to support, predicting weather, managing pandemic. I mean, Max, what else would be the benefits of this?
Earth observation and general communications with the planet.
Yeah. Now, I had a chat with Tony Baird, who's the Chief Technology Officer at 1NZ yesterday. And so a couple of things that some of our more technical listeners might be interested in is that These satellite uplinks that phones are going to be able to use are going to be a 4G connection. So it's just going to be like connecting to another 4G cell site, albeit roughly 550 kilometres away.
Kind of mind-blowing, right?
It is to think that it can just work like that, and I guess that's one of the things that, to a degree, I think we're still getting used to as the LEO satellites, the low Earth orbit satellites, because in the past satellites have always been such a long way away, and for communications there's been big delays, and a cell phone that could communicate with a satellite needed a big chunky aerial on it and so on. Of course, that sort of stuff has started becoming a thing of the past. Already lots and lots of New Zealanders have taken advantage of Starlink where they've been in the area without good internet coverage due to locality or what have you. But this is pretty interesting. 4G connection. I think it's going to use. It's going to sit on the 1800 megahertz band, where Vodafone have long had that allocation from the government.
Hey, Paul, is there a swear jar for saying the V word just
Well,
then?
no, I was actually talking historically,
All right,
so I was
you get out
allowed
of
to
it then.
mention
There you
Vodafone
go.
then.
There you
But
go.
you're right. I have to. It's going to take a little while to get used to the new name, but I think I'll let myself off on that one.
Fair enough.
But yeah, they've taken I think two 5 megahertz sort of slices that they're using. Now, what I understand initially is that it's going to take some while to build up enough satellites to provide the continuous sort of coverage for things like voice calls and data. So initially they're talking about the starting point will be text messages, and that's because you'll have a satellite will pass overhead that will be able to communicate maybe roughly every 30 seconds or a minute or so, and that's going to come past. And so your phone can wait and can send once it gets an uplink. That link will disappear till the next satellite comes past. But as they build that out, there will then ultimately be that continuous coverage. Tony mentioned 2 megabits per second. Now, I probably need to delve a little bit more into that, but it sounds like that these cell sites that are going to be on each satellite are going to have four aerials, so they'll be able to focus on 4 different areas of approximately 50 kilometres each. And so, as these things come together and are, enough of them are covering the country, then we'll get to that point of having that continuous coverage. So that kind of opens up all sorts of possibilities, I think, at that point. Now, when I first heard about the sort of US approach to this, it looked like it was maybe, and maybe I'm being a little bit tainted here by what Apple have done in North America, but their satellite service is very much for emergencies, which is a really good use case. But what 1NZ is saying is that those in rural locations that don't have coverage now will just be able to use this service on their farms or wherever folks might be to communicate day to day. So I think it's pretty exciting. The other bit on that emergency type front is they are going to, once they've got the full service operating, open it up so anyone will be able to make a 111 emergency call. It won't matter what network you're on, you'll be able to get through. So,
Well, that's a game changer.
yeah, I think really, really encouraging. And then, in addition to their announcement, around a similar time, 2 Degrees announced a trial with Link, who are also putting up low Earth orbit satellites, and they're looking for a somewhat similar type of service. Looking at Link, they're a lot earlier on in their journey of launches. I think when I look, they maybe have 3 satellites up at the moment. So that's going to be an interesting one to watch in terms of how long these things actually take to happen. But hey, the more the merrier. And Spark is saying, well, we'll be getting into it too. They're talking to satellite providers as well. So before we know it, this will just be something we take for granted and don't give it another thought. Just like GPS, it's just there and it works, right?
Absolutely, and wait till Amazon come into play with the 3,500 or so satellite constellation they're prepared to bring to market.
Yeah, well, I think when we've got this growing sort of proliferation of options, it will make our choices in some ways more complicated because you're wondering who to choose. But then we get to that competitive aspect, like what we've seen with our mobile networks here over the last decade or so. Where the prices come down, we get better and better offerings. So
well,
it's going to
becomes
be
a commodity, right?
Yeah.
And thinking though about this proliferation and what we're doing with Zenno, it's really about lifting the horizon. Sorry, there are so many puns we can do here in space, but thinking about what this means in terms of a everyday commodity, but what countries, nation states, and citizens themselves will start to benefit from the environment in space. One of the reasons I was attracted to come work at Zenno was the idea of the longer term sort of aspiration as well. But these two, news announcements now certainly speak to the applicability and impact on everyday Kiwis.
Yeah, and look, I think it's really exciting to have Zenno, within the ecosystem here in New Zealand. Obviously, there's a number of other players, some that we may never hear of because they're smaller firms just beavering away, offering and their varying support roles. But it seems to me as though Zenno has a pretty exciting opportunity. So we'll delve into that shortly. The other bit of a couple of other bits of news. We've hit 50 years since the first cell phone call took place. So that was the 3rd of April, 1973. And then it was a little over a decade later that mobile networks were commercialised, and probably although New Zealand had service in the late 80s, I guess it was really into the 90s that we really saw mobiles pick up. But we've now got to that point where again it's just become a take it for granted type of technology, hasn't it?
Totally. I mean, one thing I know, and you can fact check me on this, Paul, if you like, and I hope you will, is my understanding is that the duration of the average cell phone call has not really changed. So I think people speak on a mobile phone for around 2.5 minutes is about the normal length. And weirdly, over that 50 years, that's stayed quite consistent.
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't really thought too much about the
known fact.
The lengths of calls. I guess our habits have changed a lot, haven't we? Because we can transmit video and data and messages and so on. But sometimes we just want to do a phone call.
Or if you're like me, I take a screen grab of something because I can't remember anything. So
you
know what I mean. We use it for that, then send it to each other. 50 years, that seems crazy. Considering how much we use them now. Yeah,
and I mean, probably many people wouldn't have even clicked that it could have been 50 years ago because I guess for some it's just been taken for granted quite quickly.
I was born into the world of cell phones.
Oh, okay, right, yeah. And I was born around around a similar similar times, and I still remember getting my first couple of mobiles in the early 90s, and you were a bit of an odd one out. But what I found was it was one of those things that you wanted all of your friends to have because it completely just changed your mobility and organising social things and business things and so on. And I think we all figured that out reasonably quickly once cell phones became a more affordable gadget to carry around. And when I look back, we often talk about how costs come down as the technology evolves. And I think it wasn't that many years ago I was probably spending on my own mobile bill what these days can cover a whole team 10 or more people. So we've definitely benefited from the competition that we've seen and the commoditisation of many aspects of the technology. And then the other news was we've heard about Virgin Orbit. It sounds like they might be at the end of their run. It sounds like they've laid off the large majority of their team, and I think they've been interesting to watch because you've I guess anything sort of Virgin that's doing something interesting, and Richard Branson tends to get noticed. It's a little bit like things that Musk does and other characters. It's a really big brand, and it has been interesting to watch what Virgin have been doing from a space perspective over quite a period now. But in terms of comparing what Virgin were doing to others like Rocket Lab and so on, any comments that you can share on that front for us, Max?
Well, Virgin is, as you say, they tend to come up with very interesting solutions, very innovative. Some of them work, and if they do work, they work extremely well, and some of them do not work. So I think that's the case with Virgin Orbit. Look, it's a very unusual way to launch something into space. The way they do it is they have a Boeing, I think, spacecraft 747 modified,
yeah.
And under one of the wings they have a rocket, which they release, mid-air. Crazy idea, and they pulled it off. They made it work.
Yeah.
But they obviously have struggled to make the business work. Yeah. So I have a lot of respect for Richard and his approach in general. And there's no way to know in advance whether something will stick or not like this. Sometimes you go and explore something that is unknown. You unlock a new thing. And it comes with unexpected rewards, Crossing the Atlantic is one of the examples, Who would have thought?
Yeah.
We're now going to the moon. So it may come back with a reward, it may not. Yeah. But the difference between Elon, I guess, and Richard is that Elon tends to impress people with scale. So Elon does the same thing, but on an insane scale, right? A rocket, but look at the size of it, or it launches a spacecraft, but look at how many, Yeah, Richard normally goes just something that has not been done before. Both have value in this world, I think. Yeah.
And when we look at at launching into space, obviously we've got Rocket Lab between New Zealand and the US, and now launching from both. It was interesting listening into some of the comments at their last AGM, I think it was, and I guess just sort of watching some of the other players in the space. It seems like it's not actually a super easy way to make money, right? It's really hard, Yeah.
Even so, I'm not an expert on the launch business in general, right?
Yeah.
But I'm in the adjacent industry, so to speak, and the opinion or the rumor, right, that we have in the industry is that it's hard to make money off rockets, especially off small rockets. And there's it seems to be an increasingly more competitive market as well. We see a lot of companies trying to develop launch capabilities. And they seem, they tend to get funding. There's something on the order of like 60 to 80 companies that are trying to pursue, launch to orbit.
And I think that is to me is one of the exciting things about Rocket Lab, and like there's so many people being trying to do something similar to what they've done, but they've done it, and they've done it time and time again. So I think they've got it. If anyone's going to do well, in that space, besides SpaceX, I think that on the launch side, they're making some good moves. So I hope it plays out well.
Hats off to Peter Bear, coming an incredible entrepreneur, and certainly has helped raise the profile of the sector we're in.
They seem to have the right mindset, the team, right? They seem to have the right mindset for what they do. Rockets are extremely, risky. You have to do things very well. So yeah, it's even though humanity has been building rockets for decades now, it is still very, very hard to build a rocket that reaches orbit. Yeah, so good on them.
Yeah, and it's going to be very interesting to see neutrons.
Yes,
see
much bigger than electron.
as they scale things up. So I think that's very exciting. But we're not here to talk all about them today. Very keen to hear about the Zenno story. So maybe you can tell us a little bit of the background, and we can delve into some of the really innovative things that you've been working on.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So been thinking about Zenno for a long time now. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, started thinking about this first. And I was looking at the space industry and realizing that space is going to become more and more impactful, influential. It will affect our lives more and more, right, as time goes by. And really wanted to understand what is the next big enabling thing for the industry, right? So at the time we had obviously rockets which enabled access to space, and at the time we were seeing some companies attempting to commercialize rockets.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
I thought, okay, that's great. So that is being taken care of. But the value of going to space comes from being in space. It's not from the transit. It's from the presence, right? And when we look at it this way, I was trying to understand what is the next enabling thing. What is the bottleneck there? Mm-hmm. And it turns out that once you're in space, it's agility of your spacecraft and sustainability of that spacecraft that matters, right? If you can be there for a very long time, and if you can control the spacecraft well, if you can point it and maneuver, you're doing very well because you can provide those services, right? And then on top of this, if you can potentially ensure safety of that spacecraft from radiation of outer space, and if you could then ensure upgradability of that spacecraft, meaning that instead of writing it off at the end of its lifetime, you could potentially consider replacing a camera on it or replacing an engine on it, that would be an almost complete set of solutions for an industry that is thriving in the long term, right? So with that in mind, we started looking at, so what is preventing us from having those solutions? And we realized that, okay, so once you're in space, you rely on certain forces to achieve certain useful things, and we have a set of forces we've been exploring, that Newtonian physics, you push yourself one way, you go the other way. We've realized that, in space, we have to really rely on something that is not finite, because otherwise we have to rely on Earth all the time, have to get refueled or, end the mission prematurely and so on. And one thing that has been unexplored in space is the magnetic force. The force that is very simple. We all understand the force intuitively. When we're kids, we hold two magnets in our hand, we bring them together, they either turn each other or push on each other or pull, This force can be simulated in space, right? A spacecraft can be turned into a magnet on demand, and then Earth happens to be a magnet, a big magnet. So that force can be very, very useful for many things, okay? Provided we can harness it.
And has it been harnessed in the past?
No, because we've had some problems with the technology.
Okay.
So essentially, to harness a force, you must have a magnet, okay, simply speaking. But you can't have a permanent magnet, okay, because if it's permanent, then there's not much use from it. Okay? It's going to stick to the rocket on launch, so to speak. So you must have a magnet on demand. The magnet you can turn on and off, which in the engineering industry we call it an electromagnet, okay. Okay, but to make an electromagnet, you must have a piece of wire and run some current through it. That's it. It's all it takes. The challenge is that the conventional wire that we've had so far has been very resistant, literally resistant to any current flowing through it, and therefore it is resistant to becoming a magnet. So, but in the last few years, in the last decade or so, we've, as species, come up with technology that is called a superconducting wire. It has no resistance to electrical current flow, and therefore is very good for creating very, very strong and very efficient magnets, right? But it comes with a few, gotchas. For example, one of them, it has to be below negative 200 degrees Celsius in order for it to operate. Thankfully, space is cold, but it's not cold enough. So once you start looking at how to solve this problem, you see a few issues, a few bottlenecks, but it's a solvable problem, which is what we've done at Zenno. We've solved the problem of creating an exceptionally strong, unprecedentedly strong electromagnet very efficiently, right? We have unlocked the entire paradigm, right, so to speak. Now we have this force, which we can use for many things in space, And one of the most obvious, applications is to point a spacecraft. If we can point a spacecraft better than we can now, we can have better images, we can have better communication, we can communicate for longer, and we can stay there for longer and so on.
Right.
So which
So
is what
that's
we've been
your
doing.
starting point.
Starting
Your
point.
first product is very much focused that way. So walk us through in terms of manoeuvring, spacecraft, pointing and so on at the moment. What does that look like, and how much different is it when your technology, this approach with electromagnets is applied? Does it make a little bit of difference, a lot of difference? How does that look?
A lot of difference. Yeah, these days, the way we point spacecraft, and particularly in low Earth orbit, as you said, it's roughly a few hundred kilometers above Earth. It's closer than from here to Wellington. It's very close. Okay, when you think about it this way, it's very close.
Yeah,
a few hours of drive.
that's a good
As
way to
opposed
think of it.
As opposed to, as you said, back in the day, it was 30,000 kilometers from Earth. That's a geostationary spacecraft.
Yeah,
that's
that's kind of the satellites
that's
we've been
around
used
the
to,
Earth,
right? Yeah. It's a lot of driving.
Yeah, that's a lot of driving. So these days it's 550K. The spacecraft tend to be a lot smaller at this 550K altitude. And they are normally pointed with, there's not a single good solution. So there's a combination of solutions, right? It's either we're squirting gas from a spacecraft one way and we're turning the other way, right? Then we run out of gas and then we can't do anything about it anymore, which is not good. Or we have spinning disks on a spacecraft. If you spin a disk one way, its spacecraft goes the other way, becomes more stable, just like a push bike becomes much more stable once you're cycling on it, you don't fall left and right.
Yep.
Yeah, so, but those solutions, they're quite, they really define the size of spacecraft these days, because they're normally paired with the torque rods, which is, another subcomponent that is required to point a spacecraft. Yeah, so they're large, they're massive, and they're quite limiting, but that's as good as it gets, really. They barely do the job, and that's why we're barely content with them as an industry, Now, if we use, if we replace that suite of solutions with a supermagnet, we can reduce the mass of that solution from 45 kg down to 4 kg.
Huh?
Yes. We can then reduce the size of a spacecraft
huge
from a few
change.
meters,
Yeah.
which would define the size of spacecraft these days, right? For example, Starlink.
Yeah.
Starlink size is determined by the size of their torque rods, right? Which is a spacecraft pointing technology that we use these days. We could then reduce it down to 30 centimeters. Okay, all of a sudden you can build much smaller spacecraft and launch more of them, right? Meaning that more spacecraft, as you know, more bandwidth. More bandwidth means instead of sending a text message, you can maybe do a call.
So it's
These
going
things matter.
to that's also going to bring down your launch cost, isn't it? I mean,
Yes.
all of the costs are going to come down if you can lighten up.
That's right. Costs do come down, and it is an appealing. It's an appealing sort of selling point for the product, but it's not the most appealing. It's primarily the greatest appeal comes from the from the significantly increased range of capabilities, and the quality of work that can be done in space, and it can be done sustainably. So we just rely on solar power, and we use that solar power to create a magnetic field or magnetic sail, as you like. And we use that sail to interact with the wind, magnetic wind of Earth, right? To simplify things, yeah. So it's just sailing in space.
So it
Okay.
sounds pretty good.
Thinking about it in terms of the use of these sort of super magnets, the way I understand it, non-technically, if you like, is that it's a new fuel or a new force to be deployed to help the aspirations of people in the sector. And in terms of Zenno, that's like, how do you build life in space and think about applications that don't just enable, cell phone calls, but also consider what happens on the moon and then beyond to Mars, how long spacecraft can be up there and how long people can live in those environments and the benefits that can be yielded from it. And what's intrigued me about Zenno, which is why I joined, was the idea of this patented technology in terms of the use of these superconductors. The pointing tech, what do you call it, Mag Z01, which is the first product that we're selling, is only one of at least a dozen already other applications, and there'll be more that we don't know about yet, but we'll find out.
Yeah, Paul, we have IP protecting any use, any application of a supermagnet in space. Okay, and
How do you patent something like that? Was that a long and arduous process?
35 claims in a patent. You just start early. Right? You start early and say, hey, gentlemen and ladies, here's the solution. Could we please patent this?
Yeah.
And if you're the first one to think of this, it pays off to think far ahead. So, yeah, from the business standpoint, it's great to sell, pointing hardware. It's really good. We are currently sitting on sales on the order of tens of millions of dollars. It's just in the first year, so it's good. But this is not why we started the company, right? We started the company to become the backbone of the industry, to really enable sustainable, long-term growth of the industry, right? We want to see, space exploration. We want to see life, in space, so to speak, that is not tied to life on Earth as strictly as it is today. Yeah, so we are really looking to enable new technologies in space, such as shielding of a spacecraft and crewed spacecraft from the damaging radiation of outer space, which has been a huge issue for astronauts on the ISS, on the International Space Station, for anyone who is traveling to Moon or to Mars. There is currently an unsolved problem. There's no solution there, right? The best solution, even theoretically, to this problem is shielding such people, just like we are shielded on Earth, with a magnetic field. Right? Earth has a magnetic field and it deflects the charged particles coming from the sun or elsewhere from outer space. We can do the same thing, to a spacecraft in space. Turn it to a miniature Earth, so to speak, on demand when necessary to ensure safety.
How hard is that going to be to solve, do you think?
From the technological standpoint, it is very solvable, so that all of the enabling technologies are accessible to us. It will require monetary, resource, and a lot of courageous minds, so to speak. But it's a definitely very solvable problem. It's been theorized, for a long time, but finally we have the enabling set of technologies, and we have the IP at Zenno to do it. One of the things we want to do.
So it's been, it's about 6 years since you started Zenno?
No, I think it's our 6th year, 2017, end of 2017 we started.
Yeah. And so what's that journey looked like from there to where we are now, where you're starting to make sales, in fact, millions of dollars worth of sales already, before you've launched. What's that journey look like, and then how soon till your tech's going to be up there in craft?
Yeah, start from the end of it. The tech is up there in a few months' time. Yeah,
okay,
so we are
great.
delivering our technology this June to our partner in Italy, and then from there we are flying to US, launching on SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket end of this year. Yeah, so and then we keep shipping to our clients in the US from early next year. Yeah, and it's been 6 years. My co-founder and I started out of University of Auckland. There was a program for space systems. I think it may still be alive. Essentially encouraged undergrads actually, which is good for, it's bold to encourage undergrads, not postgrads, to think about the future of space and, identify, the areas that need to be worked on. We participated in that competition, the prize of which was to build our own spacecraft and launch it on, Rocket Lab's rocket, which was crazy, but we didn't get it. We didn't get the prize. we landed second. So that's why we went out and looked at the business case of it and approached Uni Services, which is like a commercialization branch at Auckland Uni.
Yeah.
And they gave us our first check and the second check and the third check. And then we sort of started working with VCs from there on.
Wow. And raising venture capital, you've done a sort of a seed round. I saw that written up. You raised about 10.5 million.
Yeah, 10.5 million in the bank, and we have an option to draw another 10, which I think makes it the largest seed round in the history of New Zealand. Yeah, definitely the largest tech round. Pre-revenue. So, yeah, that's. So at the time of the raise, we were like 4 people. We're currently 15, and we're going to be at 30 by the end of the next year. Yeah.
And Erica, you've moved across from the world of AI to Zenno. What's
I think maybe when with GPT-3 and 4 it became so mainstream, I thought, what the hell? And I look at some hardware. No, it was, my 3.5 or so journey with Soul Machines is hugely exciting. I was with Callahan, and part of my role there was to encourage the commercialization of our beautiful science here. the scale of it. And to be honest, I thought I should stop telling people what to do and have a crack at it myself. So I was fortunate to have those years with Soul Machines. And then when I'd met Max and started to understand a little bit more about the aspiration of Zenno, the application of this technology, the known and unknown applications of it, I became intrigued. And that intrigue led me to come and start working here with the idea of helping support Zenno's accelerated growth.
And so, what do you see as sort of the biggest challenges, for New Zealand's space sector, and I guess you've with your role with Callaghan and other things that you've done, you've probably got a broader view on our tech sector as well. What do you think is most important for us to be able to succeed?
I mean, I can answer that a couple of ways, Paul, and I think I referenced it. We have an incredible science in system in New Zealand. In the minds of people, we have beautiful engineers. We have a lot of benefit and latent capability. Where we struggle, and I'm not the first person, I won't be the last to say it, is effectively scaling and commercializing this. That's the hard bit. It's the time it takes, and we know deep tech takes 4 to 7 to 12 years to go from a concept, an idea in someone's mind, to actually being something that you hold in your hands, and then the ability to go and sell that. It's quite a long journey, and there are not many founders who are able to access capital to support that. We know the government do a great job of offering, R&D support, and I know that Soul Machines benefited from that, and likewise Zenno has done. But in order to convincingly create, own, and capture, and then capture a market segment, you really do need time to commercialize that science, and I think that's one of the challenges. But I think the possibility is there, and we've already had some great success stories.
Yeah, it does seem as though at times capital raising has been a big issue in New Zealand as well, right?
I think it's less of an issue now. I think the government, also the market itself, is, and there's a number of funds that are addressing, deep tech that we're talking about, and the slower to market commercialization of science, because this is the only way that big problems are going to be solved. Climate problems, the other issues that we need to address as humans are only going to be solved through the application of capital to these concepts. And so I think that that's become healthier of recent years. A few years ago it was pretty grim, but I mean there's a number of participants that have put their shoulders in behind them, and I mean some of it would be Elevate or the New Zealand Super Fund and ACC and others, and new funds that are here that are doing some hard work. So I think it's improving for sure, but again, I wouldn't be going to do my job if I didn't say we could always use more and faster.
Yeah, because there's always an element where if your pace isn't right, then you're going to miss out on a lot of opportunities. So what does that need to look like? Do you think, Max, for you in terms of how quickly that things need to grow, so that you're not missing out on the relevant opportunities?
Well, we are currently starting to think about our next fundraise. And then we're looking for something on the order of hundreds of millions, and in the next 2 years, that would be appropriate amount for us to continue the momentum that we have. Yeah.
So it's obviously it's a pretty big market that you're going to be addressing over the years ahead. Then.
Yes, huge market. Industry is growing very fast.
Yeah.
It is currently, I think, it's around $400 billion. It will be 1.2 trillion by 2030.
Yeah. Now we see, New Zealand has now, an incredible presence within the space sector. There's very few countries that have done launches, let alone private launches, as has happened here in New Zealand. Very early to the game in many ways, having a space agency, but other countries are recognising these opportunities too. Any thoughts on what government needs to do to obviously they are they're supporting the space sector, but any thoughts on what's important to ensure that New Zealand keeps the momentum and speeds up?
I mean, maybe before Max answers that, one of the things that struck me, being new to the sector, let's be honest, and hands up as a newbie, is countries globally are increasingly looking at space as part of their general architecture. So looking at it not as something exploratory, but something that they must have now. And we've spoken about that ubiquity or that utility already today. So I think the opportunity is not about one of imagination, it's actually one of necessity.
The government needs to be more decisive. From my understanding, the government was decisive at the time when Rocket Lab was, needed the government to be decisive, and therefore we created the space agency, thanks to, largely to Peter Crabtree, who was at the time leading the space agency. He's
We benefit as our board chair.
He's currently chairing our board, But I think the government lost the momentum. Like, the agency is not moving fast enough, and there isn't enough support for the industry.
So
we had a lead. We had a little bit of a head start there, right?
Yeah, but it's easily lost if we don't keep that focus and keep that momentum, which is hard because governments are balancing and juggling all sorts of things, and
I think
often
that the news that you shared in the beginning of this conversation speaks to how important it is, though. We've got a long, spiny country. It's hard to navigate, and the ability to draw resource from the skies to support what we need is massively compelling when we think of the number of services potentially that can be delivered this way.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, Paul, we do take pride in signing this contract, which is a great achievement. But I see it as an entrepreneur, the way I see it is, what would have been the country launching the Starlink ourselves. It's not something that is impossible for us to achieve as a nation. We should think bigger, and we should move faster.
I agree. I don't know how exactly how we do it. Obviously, we've got to support those like yourself that have got the innovative ideas and creating the businesses that can put New Zealand on the map. And I think there's that challenge that governments have between sort of looking at the here and now, the short-term thinking rather than the futurist thinking. And you have to have both. You have to address the issues that we have right now and here today. But I think we have that challenge of the longer-term thinking that doesn't necessarily win, votes in the short term, but is the right thing to do for the longer-term future of New Zealand.
Paul,
right?
think about it though. The future thinking it lands in your lap and no time flat. What seemed like pipe dreams are actually complete realities, and it seems crazy now when you brought up 50 years ago since the first cell phone, and I mean that seems unthinkable at the time that all of us would be using this technology all the time and every day.
Well, let's. I want to wish you luck, and let's hope we can see more of these sorts of things coming out of New Zealand. I don't know what all the possibilities are, but are there any other things that you can share, Max, on what you think the opportunities are for both for Zenno and for New Zealand within the sector?
I mean, Zenno is at the start of its journey, so we're only just starting to gain traction. For New Zealand, though, I mean, the nation should realize. We should realize that space is going to be controlling our lives. Space exploration is going to be controlling our lives largely. And and that's an industry that is currently in its development stages. It's not too late yet to act on it, you know. But we certainly don't want to be dependent on those who have, you know, explored space and, you know, invested into it, and then, you know, just sort of, you know, be in their hands. It doesn't need to be that way. Yeah.
And so maybe, you know, having a seat at the table, which is what we did in the early days, is something that we should take seriously, about thinking of the consequences, ethics, as well as the use of space, and thinking that it's important for New Zealand to have a voice in those conversations too.
And are there any other challenges we have from being down here versus being in the US or in other locations? Have we got advantages being down here, disadvantages, or does it not make much different from a sort of competitive perspective?
I have an unpopular opinion. It doesn't change anything. You know, it's all mindset. There's no advantage or disadvantage to it.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Yeah. Get it done. That's great. Oh, well, thank you both for joining the New Zealand Tech Podcast today. I think very exciting, and it's great to catch a little glimpse of some of the possibilities of where things can head with Zenno, and you know, I guess that bigger picture of what might be possible in the years ahead. And of course, thank you to our show partners, 1NZ, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, and Gorilla Technology. And thanks everyone for joining us on the show and listening in. We'll look forward to catching you again next week on the next episode. See ya.
Thanks, Paul. Cheers. See ya.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.